The Zen era had watched humanity from afar for centuries, studying their movements, observing their primitive ways, as they grew from a fledgling species into something capable of interstellar exploration. The Zen era had always seen themselves as the rulers of the galaxy. Their advanced technology and unmatched intellect had allowed them to dominate countless worlds, yet when they saw the humans, they dismissed them as nothing more than an insignificant blip in the grand scale of the universe. They believed that humanity was too young, too unrefined, to pose any real threat, and so they decided to provoke them, not with direct confrontation at first, but with subtle moves designed to test their reactions. The Zen era had perfected the art of manipulation. They would strike humanity's colonies in the outer rim of the galaxy, cutting off their resources and making them vulnerable, and in their arrogance, they believed that this would break humanity's spirit. It began with a series of hit-and-run attacks on human outposts scattered across the stars. The Zen era used their superior ships to bombard the colonies from afar before retreating back into the depths of space. Each attack was meant to send a message, a warning that the humans were not fit to belong among the stars. It was a move designed to make them retreat into submission, to cower before the might of the Zen era. But the humans were different than what the Zen era had expected. Instead of fleeing or surrendering, they responded with something the aliens did not understand: defiance. Humanity's leaders called for unity, and within days they mobilized every fleet they could muster with a determination that no one had predicted. The humans were resourceful. They adapted and innovated in ways that took the Zen era by surprise. They did not break under pressure. Instead, they began to fight back with a willpower that the Zen era found both puzzling and unsettling. The Zen era had thought that their attack would crush the humans instantly, that their technological superiority would ensure an easy victory. Yet now they found themselves facing a people who refused to back down, who refused to let fear define them. The first few skirmishes had been minor, but soon the humans started to gain ground. They started to push back against the Zen era fleets, and the aliens found themselves in unfamiliar territory. In one bold maneuver, human forces intercepted a Zen-era supply ship and captured it intact. They analyzed the alien vessel with an intensity that left the Zen-era leaders stunned. The humans were fast learners. They deciphered alien technology at a rate that seemed almost impossible. With each victory, the Zen-era saw their advantage slipping away, and for the first time they began to question whether they had made a grave miscalculation. The humans did not crumble under pressure as the Zen era had anticipated. They did the opposite. They fought back with a fierce ingenuity that defied all expectations. In the face of overwhelming odds, the humans had discovered a strength that the Zen era had never thought to consider, and it was a strength that would prove to be their greatest weapon. As the war began to escalate, the Zen era would learn a painful truth. They had provoked humanity into war, but now they were about to face the consequences. The Zen era were accustomed to effortless victories. Their enemies would crumble at the sight of their ships or their weapons, but humanity was different. They did not cower under the weight of the Zen era's might. They rose up as one and began to show the galaxy what it meant to challenge a species driven by a deep and unyielding will to survive. The first few strikes had been small, but now humanity was learning from every encounter and adapting with a speed that baffled the aliens. The humans had a trait that the Zen era had never expected. They were adaptable and versatile. They took the scattered remnants of their fleets and brought them together in a unity that had never been seen before. Instead of fracturing under the weight of the alien onslaught, the humans bonded even more closely. They learned from each other's victories and failures, incorporating every bit of knowledge into their fight. The Zen era thought the humans would falter under the pressure of war, but they underestimated just how far the human spirit could go. A new kind of warfare began to take shape as human commanders developed unconventional tactics that confounded the Zen era forces. They didn't fight with sheer power alone. They fought with strategy and ingenuity, using the environment around them to their advantage. They began to use the same alien technology the Zen era had once used to attack them against the very species that had tried to destroy them. Humanity began to turn the tables. On the battlefield, human forces showed something that no alien species had ever expected. They fought not only for survival, but for something deeper, a desire to protect their homes, their families, and their future. Each soldier knew they were part of something larger than themselves, something that transcended borders or flags. They fought not just as individual nations or colonies, but as a unified species defending everything they held dear. As the war raged on, the Xinera found themselves caught in a trap of their own making. They had expected the humans to bend their will, to retreat or submit to an alien overlordship, but instead they found themselves tangled in the web of humanity's determination. With each victory, the humans grew stronger and more confident in their abilities, and the Xinera leaders began to realize that their arrogance had clouded their judgment. The Xinera made their first mistake when they underestimated the humans' ability to learn and grow. The second mistake came when they refused to acknowledge that the human drive to survive was unlike anything they had encountered before. While the Xinera may have seen themselves as the pinnacle of evolution, the humans had something they lacked: the power of unity and the sheer will to endure. The Xinera had always thought that they could conquer the galaxy by strength alone, but now they were facing a species that fought with every ounce of their being and refused to be intimidated. It was no longer just a war for survival. It was a war for the future. Humanity was fighting not to simply survive, but to thrive, and the Xinera were beginning to understand the full extent of the storm they had unleashed. They had provoked humanity into war, and now they were learning the painful truth that humanity would never surrender. It would never be broken. It would always rise again. With each passing day, humanity gained more ground, and the Xinera began to falter. They had underestimated the humans at every turn, and now they were paying the price for their overconfidence. Their empire that had seemed so untouchable now found itself on the brink of collapse, and the humans who had once been seen as insignificant were proving themselves to be their greatest adversary. As the war against the Xinera stretched on, humanity's forces began to show signs of not just survival, but mastery. Their ingenuity became their strongest asset in the face of an enemy that once seemed invincible. Every new tactic, every new idea they implemented added a layer of unpredictability that kept the Xinera on the defensive. What the aliens had assumed would be a quick and easy conquest had turned into a drawn-out and brutal struggle. Human engineers and scientists worked tirelessly day and night, often at the front lines, to reverse engineer the alien technology they had captured. The Xinera had relied heavily on their advanced tech to maintain their superiority, but humanity was quick to adapt, turning the very weapons that had once struck fear into their hearts into tools of their own making. Human scientists cracked the codes to their enemies' communication systems, and soon the Xinera found that their military strategies could no longer be carried out with the precision they had once enjoyed. The turning point came when humanity managed to reverse engineer one of the Xinera's most advanced warships, a sleek and deadly vessel designed for long-range strikes that had once decimated human outposts with ease. Now in human hands, it was used against the very fleet that had brought it into battle. The Xinera could hardly believe what they were seeing. They had always thought themselves the masters of technology, but the humans were beginning to rival them in every way. Human commanders began to use this new advantage with remarkable brilliance. They orchestrated raids that were bold and precise, taking down entire alien battalions with minimal losses. They would infiltrate Xinera supply lines, causing chaos and confusion within their ranks. When the Xinera tried to counter these moves, the humans were already one step ahead of them, anticipating their next move before it could even be made. It was a relentless cycle of human innovation and Xinera frustration. As the war continued, it became clear that the Xinera had gravely underestimated the humans' ability to not only learn but to push the boundaries of what they thought was possible. The humans didn't just copy their enemy's technology, they improved upon it, making it more efficient, more deadly, and more adaptable than ever before. In battle, they became unpredictable, using everything from makeshift weapons to newly developed gadgets that turned the tide of combat in ways the Xinera had never imagined. The Xinera had always prided themselves on their intelligence, But now they were being outsmarted at every turn as humanity learned to think like their enemy, and then outthink them. The very technology that had been designed to break humanity's spirit now became their greatest strength. With each new victory, the humans grew bolder and more confident in their abilities. Their technological leap was swift and astonishing, and the Xin era were beginning to panic. In response, the Xin era attempted to ramp up their technological development. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, they introduced new weapon systems that were even more advanced than before, hoping to regain the upper hand. But again, they were met with the same unexpected resistance. Humanity had grown adept at exploiting even the smallest flaw in the Xin era's technology, and now those flaws were becoming more and more apparent with every encounter. As the Xin era faced the full brunt of humanity's newly found brilliance, they realized they had miscalculated in their arrogance. They had assumed their superiority in every aspect, but humanity had shown them something they had never expected: a boundless creativity that could overcome any obstacle. And now the Xin era were paying the price for underestimating the human capacity for innovation and the unwavering resolve to protect their future. As humanity's response to the Xin era became increasingly sophisticated, the tide of the war began to shift in ways that sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The Xin era had once been the unrivaled power in the universe. Their advanced technology, strategic brilliance, and overwhelming fleet making them seemingly invincible. But the human forces, now unified and increasingly ingenious, had transformed from desperate defenders into a force capable of striking back with terrifying precision. It began with a series of unexpected victories: raids on Xin-era supply lines, sudden attacks on critical infrastructure, and surgical strikes on key military assets. These operations, coordinated by human commanders who had once been scattered across the galaxy, were now pulling together into a unified strategy that the Xin era could not predict. With each new victory, humanity's confidence grew, and their adaptability, once considered a weakness by the Xin era, had become their greatest strength. The Xin era, for all their might, found themselves unable to counter these human tactics. They had relied on the predictability of their technological superiority, assuming that their overwhelming firepower would crush humanity's efforts. But humans were not bound by rigid plans. They improvised, learned, and evolved faster than the Xin era could react. Every time the Xin era attempted to strike back with brute force, humanity's forces outmaneuvered them, using the terrain, the environment, and even their own technology against them. It was a war of wits, and the Xin era were struggling to keep up. The humans' ability to innovate was not just in their use of technology, but in their understanding of the battlefield itself. They began to exploit the smallest advantages, taking advantage of the Xin era's overconfidence, using their ships as bait to lure them into traps, and ambushing their patrols in ways that left the alien forces reeling. What the Xin era had once viewed as simple guerrilla tactics had now evolved into a series of sophisticated operations that were leaving their military commanders scrambling to respond. The Xin era's high command, frustrated by their inability to regain control, began to lose faith in their initial assumptions about the war. The idea that humanity could be crushed with a few decisive blows now seemed laughable. The Xin era had expected the humans to break, to fall into disarray, but instead they had turned their rage and their ingenuity into a weapon. Their attacks grew bolder, more coordinated, and more effective with every passing day. It wasn't just about survival anymore. Humanity had tasted victory, and they were hungry for more. In response, the Xin era escalated the war, deploying larger fleets and even more devastating weaponry in an attempt to force humanity to submit. But the human spirit could not be so easily crushed. While the Xin era brought their might to bear, humanity's forces pushed back with everything they had. The humans fought not only for survival, but for something much more profound: their place in the galaxy, the right to exist, and the refusal to be subjugated by a race that believed itself superior. The war had evolved from a fight for survival into a battle for freedom. Humanity's forces, once scattered and vulnerable, were now united in their resolve to reclaim what the Xin era had tried to take from them. As the Zin Era's empire began to crumble under the weight of these continuous human victories, it became clear that the aliens' superiority complex had blinded them to the true power of their adversary. The human counteroffensive was relentless, and the Zin Era were running out of options. It wasn't just a matter of winning battles anymore. It was about ensuring that the Zin Era could never again threaten humanity or any other species in the galaxy. The shift had occurred, and now humanity was on the rise. Humanity's rise from the brink of defeat to a force that could challenge the Zin Era Empire had been nothing short of miraculous. Every battle, every victory, added fuel to the fire that burned in the hearts of their people. The war had long since ceased to be about survival alone. It was now a war of liberation, a war to prove to the galaxy that humanity could never again be underestimated. But there was one mission that would shift the tide entirely, one that no one had expected, not even the humans themselves. It came about not through sheer military might, but through a stroke of brilliance, a bold gamble that would either end the war or send humanity into a new dark age. The plan was to infiltrate the very heart of the Zin Era Empire, to strike directly at the source of their power and leadership. The Zin Era had always considered their capital to be impenetrable, their fortress of strength and authority. It was a world protected by the most advanced weapons and defenses, a hub of their empire's control. No one had dared to even think about a direct assault on such a stronghold, let alone succeed. But humanity had something the Zin Era could never predict: audacity. A coalition of human soldiers, engineers, and strategists, led by the finest commanders the war had produced, hatched a plan to infiltrate the heart of Zin Era territory. It was risky, far riskier than any mission humanity had undertaken before, but it was the one move that could potentially break the back of the Zin Era Empire once and for all. The humans would strike not with overwhelming force, but with precision, a small but elite task force designed to hit fast, hard, and unexpectedly. The Zin Era were no fools. They had placed all their defenses around their capital, believing it to be invulnerable. They had not expected a full-scale assault on their core, and they had certainly not accounted for human ingenuity. The humans, using stolen Zin Era technology and new tactics developed in secret, infiltrated enemy space undetected, using decoys and stealth to mask their movements. The task force moved quickly and silently, exploiting every flaw in the Zin Era defenses, taking down key communication hubs and power grids as they advanced. The operation unfolded with an almost surgical precision, stunning the Zin Era commanders who had always believed that no one could ever breach their capital. What the aliens didn't realize was that the human forces had studied their every weakness, every blind spot, and they had turned those weaknesses into their greatest strengths. Within hours, the human task force reached the heart of the Zin Era capital, deep inside the Imperial Palace itself. The Zin Era leadership was caught completely off guard as the humans infiltrated their most secure facility. Key figures within the Empire were captured, and their plans were exposed. It was a devastating blow that sent shockwaves through the Zin Era command structure, unraveling their chain of authority. The humans didn't just destroy their physical infrastructure, they had struck at the heart of the Zin Era psyche. The leaders who had once believed in their absolute superiority, in their unshakable rule, were now prisoners, and the entire empire was thrown into chaos. This unexpected victory was not just a military win, it was a psychological blow that shattered the Zin Era's confidence and left their entire empire teetering on the edge of collapse. Back home, humanity celebrated the success of the mission, but they knew the fight was far from over. The Zin Era would retaliate with everything they had, but the humans had proven something undeniable. They were no longer the prey. They were the hunters. They had struck at the heart of the alien empire and had emerged victorious. The war was no longer a question of survival. It was a question of domination, and humanity was ready to finish what they had started. The victory within the Zin Era capital sent ripples of uncertainty through their entire empire, but the Zin Era were not a species to crumble easily. Despite the crushing blow to their leadership and the confusion that had spread among their ranks, they rallied with an unyielding determination. Their empire was vast, and their military might, though shaken, was still formidable. They would not go down without a fight. In the days that followed the daring assault, the Zinera High Command regrouped and began to rebuild their forces. They were humiliated, yes, but they were also enraged. The once proud species had been made to feel vulnerable, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim their position at the top of the galaxy. Their leaders began to tighten their grip, purging those they deemed weak, and preparing their military for the final phase of the war. Humanity, however, had already shifted the momentum in their favor. The unexpected victory had done more than just undermine the Zinera's authority. It had ignited a fire in the hearts of people across the galaxy. The united front that humanity had forged was no longer just a defense against an invasion. It was a battle cry for the future. The war had become something personal for every human who had ever been oppressed, ever been subjugated. And with each passing day, more and more allies came to their side, forming an ever-expanding coalition of species that sought to see the fall of the Zinera. Human leaders, once hesitant to engage in full-scale retaliation, now rallied around the success of the capital mission. The task force's bravery became the stuff of legends, a symbol of humanity's resilience and resolve. They had shown the galaxy that the humans were capable of defeating even the mightiest forces, and that they could take the fight to the Zinera on their own terms. In this new phase of the war, the humans began to press harder than ever. Their fleets, now equipped with both stolen and reverse-engineered Zinera technology, moved with a precision and deadliness that turned the tide in battles that had once seemed hopeless. The Zinera, now fighting a war on multiple fronts, struggled to maintain the same level of dominance they once had. Their fleets, once unchallenged, now found themselves losing ground in every engagement. Humanity had learned from their enemies' mistakes, and their new tactics rendered the Zinera's technological superiority irrelevant. The Zinera responded with greater violence, deploying their most devastating weapons in an attempt to push back the human advance. But it was too late. The humans were no longer a scattered force of colonies. They were a united, cohesive power, and their will to succeed was matched only by their ingenuity. Humanity had become the masters of asymmetric warfare, using every advantage they had, every piece of knowledge, every scrap of technology, to outsmart and outmaneuver their foes. The final phase of the war saw the Zinera struggle to maintain their empire, their resources stretched thin, and their leadership in disarray. The once feared alien race was now fighting a losing battle, not just for control of the galaxy, but for their very survival. As humanity's forces continued their relentless push forward, it became clear that the Zinera Empire was collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance and overreach. The reckoning had arrived. The Zinera had provoked humanity, believing them to be weak, believing them to be nothing more than another species to conquer. But now, humanity had become something they could no longer control, something they could no longer defeat. The aliens had triggered a war they were never prepared to win, and they were paying the price for their miscalculations. With each passing day, the Zinera's defeat became inevitable. Humanity had shown them that the human spirit could not be broken, and that their fight for survival had become a fight for justice, for freedom, and for the future of every species that refused to kneel before tyranny. The Zinera had provoked humanity into war, and now they would face the consequences of their hubris. The once great Zinera Empire, now fractured and on the brink of collapse, found itself clinging desperately to the remnants of its power. The human forces, united and relentless, had shattered the Zinera's military supremacy, turning the tide of the war with such swift and brutal precision that the aliens' once unquestionable dominion over the galaxy now seemed like a distant memory. The war had moved beyond survival. It was now a crusade for freedom, a fight not just to preserve humanity, but to liberate all those who had suffered under the Zinera's brutal rule. With the Zinera's leadership in disarray, their fleets scattered, and their resources dwindling, the humans pressed on with the final push to end the war. Their forces, now battle-hardened and armed with a blend of human ingenuity and Xen-era technology, swept across the galaxy. Each victory built on the last, and with every battle, the alien empire's hold on its colonies weakened. The rebellion, which had once seemed like an impossible dream, had turned into an unstoppable wave, crashing against the crumbling walls of the Xen-era's power. But the Xen-era were not done yet. Though their empire was on the verge of collapse, they still possessed one last weapon, a weapon that had the potential to turn the war in their favor, a weapon that could wipe out entire human fleets in an instant. The Xen-era's high command, though in disarray, had kept this final weapon hidden from the rest of their forces, believing it to be their last hope. The humans, aware of the Xen-era's desperation, were ready for anything. The final push would not be without danger. Their forces had become accustomed to being on the offensive, but this new weapon, whatever it was, could change everything. Yet there was no turning back now. The galaxy had already seen what humanity was capable of, and they would not stop until the Xen-era were defeated completely. It was then that humanity's most daring operation began. A coordinated strike against the Xen-era's central command hub, where the last remnants of their leadership had gathered. This was no longer a fight against invaders. It was a fight for the very soul of the galaxy. The humans had learned the Xen-era's weaknesses, their tactics, and their technology. But this final mission was about more than just military superiority. It was about taking the fight directly to the core of the Xen-era's power and ending their reign of terror once and for all. The mission was perilous. The human task force, made up of the finest soldiers, engineers, and scientists, had to infiltrate a heavily guarded world, one that was shielded by layers of advanced Xen-era defense systems. This was their last chance to destroy the Xen-era's high command and cripple any possibility of a retaliatory strike. The final weapon, humanity's intelligence network had discovered, was hidden beneath the surface of this world, an ancient facility that could turn the tide of the war if activated. The humans launched their attack with precision. Under the cover of darkness, they'd bypassed Xen-era patrols, using every trick they had learned to stay one step ahead. As they approached the facility, they discovered the true extent of the Xen-era's desperation. The weapon was a doomsday device, capable of unleashing destruction across entire sectors of the galaxy. At that moment, humanity faced a choice: destroy the weapon and end the Xen-era threat, but risk triggering an uncontrollable chain reaction, or attempt to disable it and capture the Xen-era leadership in one final act of defiance. The decision was clear. The humans knew they could not let the weapon fall into the wrong hands, no matter the cost. The final battle raged as humanity's forces pushed forward, clashing with the remaining Xen-era defenders in a brutal confrontation that would decide the fate of the galaxy. It was a race against time, as humanity's forces fought tooth and nail to disable the weapon, knowing that every second they delayed brought them closer to a future in which the Xen-era would rise again. As the countdown to the weapon's activation ticked down, the humans succeeded in their mission, but at a cost. The Xen-era leadership was captured, their final weapon disabled, and their empire fractured beyond repair. The war, which had once seemed impossible to win, was now over. The war was over, and humanity stood victorious. The Xen-era empire, once a dominant force across the galaxy, lay in ruins. Their last hope, their doomsday weapon, had been deactivated just in time, sparing countless lives and ensuring that the destruction they had once threatened would not come to pass. The galaxy was free from the Xen-era's tyrannical grasp, and humanity had proven that it was no longer a helpless species to be dominated. They were a force to be reckoned with. The cost of the war, however, had been immense. While the humans had triumphed, the scars of the conflict were everywhere. Worlds lay in ruin, cities destroyed, and countless lives lost. But there was something even greater at play now: the promise of a new future. Humanity, having faced near extinction, had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. The galaxy had seen their resilience, their ingenuity, and their unyielding will to survive. No longer would they cower in the shadow of the Zen era. No longer would they be victims of alien conquest. The humans had turned the tables, and in doing so, had set a new course for their future. In the aftermath of the war, the leaders of the human coalition took charge of the rebuilding efforts. It wasn't just about restoring what had been lost. It was about forging something better, something stronger. The people of Earth and their allies from across the galaxy came together to establish a new order. The old divisions between species, once separated by fear and mistrust, began to fade. In their place, a new alliance was born, one founded on the principles of freedom, unity, and mutual respect. The Zen era's empire had been built on oppression and conquest, but humanity's victory would be built on cooperation and understanding. As the galaxy began to heal, the humans, once a scattered and divided species, took on the mantle of leadership. They led the effort to restore planets ravaged by the war, using their technology to rebuild cities, repair ecosystems, and provide aid to those who had suffered the most. The war had taken so much from them, but it had also taught them invaluable lessons about strength, sacrifice, and the power of unity. Humanity's legacy would not be defined by the destruction they had endured, but by the future they had forged in the aftermath. The Zen era, meanwhile, were forced to reckon with the consequences of their actions. The once proud species, now broken and leaderless, had no choice but to surrender. The remaining Zen era were forced to face the reality of their defeat, and the humans, despite their triumph, offered them a choice: to join the new galaxy as equals or face the continued wrath of those they had once oppressed. Some Zen era chose to accept the humans' terms, while others were unwilling to give up their arrogance and pride. Those who chose peace were slowly integrated into the new alliance, but there would be no return to the days of their empire. The Zen era had learned, too late, that dominance and fear could never sustain a lasting reign. The human race, having proven their resilience, now faced the challenge of leading a galaxy in need of rebuilding and healing. The scars of war would take time to fade, but the future held the promise of something far greater than what had come before. With the Zen era's empire shattered and their own people united, the humans began to chart a course for a future built on cooperation, peace, and exploration. They would not let the mistakes of the past define them. The galaxy was wide, and for the first time in centuries, it was open for all to explore. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. And with that, the dawn of a new era began, one where no species would ever be forced to live in fear again.